can also happen. That's why there's a need for us to be informed. We cannot just let our local government leaders to just plan it by themselves without you being involved. And the reason why you're all here is that this information will have to be factored in. And we have our national panel of experts who are more than willing and very generous of their time to answer. That's right, Doc?
I think the key word here is still preparedness.
Preparedness. And later we will know a lot about preparedness by someone really a good friend of ours, and later they will explain what to do. And I think the next speakers will get this conversation going for you to know more about preparedness. So thank you very much, Pebbles.
Thank you very much, Secretary
you.
Lucille, for moderating our open discussion with the members of the National Panel of Technical Experts. Jules, ano nga ba ang ginagawa ng National Panel of Technical Experts sa kasalukuyan?
All right, Ate Pebbles, and ladies and gentlemen, to share the initiatives of the National Panel of Technical Experts, may we invite Dr. Rodel Lasco of the World Agroforestry Center for this talk. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Okay. Well, good morning to all of you. Magandang umaga. It's really a pleasure on my part, to be able to share with you what we are doing in terms of the work of the technical panel of the Climate Change Commission. I guess this is the second slide, but nevertheless, let me go straight to here. We know what happened 2 weeks ago, and if you can press, please. But this is the big question. Is this climate change? That's one of the things that was discussed, being discussed in the media, as well perhaps as to the minds of a lot of people like yourself. And this is a very science question. And you might think that the answer is simple, or you might think that I will give you an answer. No, I won't give you an answer, because the answer is more nuanced, more complex than just simply saying yes or no. It can be yes, it can be no, depending on how we reason out. And my point is that science is a very important part of responding to climate change. Let's remember that the whole climate change issue, greenhouse gases, and everything else, really started with science and technology. Sino ba naka-imbento ng makina, ng paggamit ng fossil fuels, and so on. So a lot of the things we enjoy came from science, and we are blessed because of science. But however, there are also negative impacts of science. At ang isa na nga dyan, yung tinatawag natin ngayon, climate change. Next, please. And so we thought of, together with the Climate Change Commission and with funding from the OML Center, we thought of starting our own Philippines Climate Change Assessment. Next, please. It is led, it's being led, and it's happening as I speak. We're doing the assessment right now. It is led by Filipino scientists who are part of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and as well, of course, as my colleagues who are sitting with me here right now. It is the first ever assessment of science comprehensively in the country. Next, please. And the main objective of this is to synthesize the available information in terms of the technical as well as the socio-economic aspects of climate change in the Philippines. So just like the IPCC, and by the way, we patterned this after the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports. And that assessment has been going on since the early 90s. And so there will be 3 groups. The first group, which is composed of a panel of scientists, about 10 Filipino scientists, will look at the physical science basis. Working Group 2 will look at the impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability. And finally, Working Group 3 will look at mitigation. Next, please. And to give you an idea of what's to come out, this is just 2 months ago, the IPCC released their Working Group 2 report, Working Group 1 report, the physical science basis. So here's an example of the report, and as you can see from this is the projection of the global temperature, average surface temperature in the next 100 years. So this kind is global. So what we want to do is also to synthesize available information for the Philippines. Next, please. This is the IPCC, again, 2013 report showing that the world will become wet and even wetter moving forward in the next 100 years. Next, please. And of course, shown earlier by Secretary Sering is the Pag-asa projections for the Philippines in the next 100 years. So this is the kind of data and information that will be part of the Working Group 1. Next, please. Working Group 2 is all about impacts and adaptation. And again, here's an example from the recent IPCC report, 2012, showing the exposure to tropical cyclones. And if you will note from there, the people exposed will double in Asia in the year 2030. So these are the kinds of science information. There's a lot of scientific literature out there. And so we want to synthesize, we want to see what's the latest conclusions of science in our country. Next, please. This is another example. It's not from the IPCC, but an example of rice, cultivation, irrigated rice, and how it may change in the next 50 years, or about next 40 years. By 2050, how irrigated rice yield may change. And in this data, it may decline by up to a quarter, 25% by 2050 with climate change. Next, please. But there are also adaptation techniques. We don't just wait for things to happen. We want to be proactive about it. And here's one research showing how breeding can help in terms of submergence, flood tolerance of rice varieties. As you can see, some rice varieties are still alive after 17 days of being underwater, while some varieties are totally dead on the water, literally. So if we can develop more of those breeds that can survive flooding, then of course that will add to the food security of our country. Next, please. Next, please. And finally, Working Group 3 will look at mitigation or reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Next, please. And as you can see from here, this is the latest inventory, greenhouse gas inventory of the country. And every Filipino, all of us, emit about 2 tons of CO2 per year based on this data. And an American will probably emit 10 times more CO2 per year. Next, please. And there are many ways, again, as shown in the video earlier. We can tap wind power. Next, please. We can also plant trees. They sequester carbon. They store carbon. Next, please. And finally, my last slide is just showing a non-scientific study, but nevertheless, most of you are aware, of course, with the internet and Google. And I just type in Google metrics or Google Trends the amount of search for climate change in the web. This was last year. I did this last year. And quite interestingly, after 2007, there was really a lot of interest in climate change around the world. But most surprising of all, if you tap the next slide, please, what this very quick study showed is that the Philippines is the #1 searcher for climate change. Is that surprising, right? Or perhaps not surprising, considering that we are the ones who are most interested with climate change because of typhoons, for example. So this is in a way encouraging that a lot of Filipinos, a lot of search in the web on climate change are being done by Filipinos. No, they're looking for information. We want information because we know that climate change is real to us in this country. And so with this, let me end. I think this is the last slide. And let me thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rodel Lasco. And of course, it is an honor for us to be with the National Panel of Technical Experts.
All right, so now that we have learned the science of climate change, one of our climate change experts will share an online and traffic portal that is currently developing with the television network.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Carlos Primo David or Dr. CP David and Mr. Nathaniel Cruz, o mas kilala natin bilang Mang Tani, GMA News resident meteorologist.
Good afternoon, everyone. If there's one thing that we need to learn in the aftermath of Typhoon Yolanda is that information, even accurate information, may not be enough. 2 days before Yolanda, we actually knew of the typhoon track. We knew how powerful it would be. We even calculated how high the storm surge would be in areas like Tacloban. But it seems that it's not enough because in the wake of Typhoon Yolanda, many of our communities were left unprepared, and therefore many casualties and damages have occurred after this. in the advent of climate change and natural